Here are 67 Minecraft things that totally shouldn't be real, but are actually completely true. The last fact might just blow your mind, so stay tuned. Let's start with the White Enderman. Yeah, you heard that right. Back in the beta version of Minecraft, there was actually another version of everyone's favorite teleporting dude. Instead of the tall black creature we know today, early Endermen were originally white, with glowing green eyes and a much stranger appearance. Not only that, but their design was actually inspired by the Slenderman creepypasta, which was extremely popular on the internet at the time. Eventually, Mojang changed the design to the darker version we have today, making them look much more like mysterious creatures from another dimension. But strange removed mobs aren't the only weird things hiding in Minecraft, because somehow, you can actually have water in the Nether. Normally, if you place water in the Nether, it instantly evaporates, but there are a few strange exceptions. For example, cauldrons can hold water even in the Nether. You can also bring water bottles, and they behave completely normally. And in certain versions of the game, water can even briefly appear during world generation or glitches, which definitely feels like something that shouldn't be possible in a lava-filled dimension. And that's not the only weird fact about the Nether. Everyone knows that sleeping in the Nether can be a very, very bad idea, especially for those who don't want to be blown up in a massive explosion, but apparently our good pals the villagers can actually sleep in the Nether like it's no big deal. While beds explode for players, villagers can casually climb into one and sleep like it's just another normal night. Talk about heavy sleepers. But that isn't the only weird fact about villagers, because apparently they can actually equip armor. If a villager picks up armor off the ground, it can automatically equip it, giving it the same protection bonus the armor normally provides. You can also force them to equip the armor using dispensers, which seems perfectly ethical. This all means it's technically possible for a villager to walk around wearing full diamond armor, but what's even weirder is they have no visual indication of it at all. And that's not all. If the armor is enchanted, the villagers gain access to those as well. So yeah, a villager wearing full diamond armor enchanted with thorns is possible, and yeah, anything that attacks them will take damage. The facts only get crazier from here, but before we continue, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel out, and I am pretty sure Notch himself would like you too. So I mean, do you really want to disappoint Notch? But if you thought armored villagers were strange, wait until you hear this one. Foxes can actually fight with swords. I am sure that you all know. Well, at least most of you know that foxes can carry around items in their mouth. But did you know that when they carry a sword, it will actually deal the same damage as the sword itself when it attacks? That means a fox holding a diamond sword can technically deal the same damage as a player using one. And foxes can do even more than that. Like if a fox somehow gets its hand on a totem of undying, they can actually use it to survive a fatal blow just like a player. So if you have a pet fox, you might consider giving them one of your spare totems. It might just save their life. But foxes aren't the only mobs with strange abilities. Another crazy mob fact belongs to skeletons. These guys actually have a surprising trick in their arsenal. Under the right circumstances, a skeleton can shoot a ghast's fireball back at the ghast itself. If the skeleton fires an arrow at the right moment, the arrow can hit the fireball and send it flying back toward the ghast, killing it. Yeah, the player isn't the only one with cool tricks, but I doubt the skeletons get the cool achievement, unfortunately. One of the biggest hassles in Minecraft is definitely getting the elytra, and one big hurdle in that process is killing the ender dragon. But what if I told you that it was entirely possible to get an elytra before even fighting the ender dragon? All you need is a piston to make it work. If you use a piston, you can actually glitch yourself under the end portal, which will spawn you at relative coordinates in the end, skipping the end dragon fight completely. So if you are itching to get an elytra, this may be the way to go. But that's not even the strangest fact, because apparently you can actually get the ender dragon into the overworld in survival mode. Thanks to some very weird mechanics involving portals and chunk loading, players have managed to find a way to move the dragon into the overworld. The trick works by forcing the dragon to fly through the end portal that normally sends players back to the overworld. Under the right conditions, the game treats the dragon like any other entity and simply transfers it through the portal. When this happens, the dragon suddenly appears in the overworld. So yeah, technically speaking, you can fight the ender dragon in the overworld in survival Minecraft, or just have a cool dragon that totally won't destroy anything. But don't worry, if you accidentally unleash the ender dragon in the overworld, Minecraft actually has a way to recruit some backup, because if you use a name tag to name a Vindicator Johnny, it will start attacking literally everything in sight. Okay, maybe a bloodlusted Vindicator won't be the best companion against the ender dragon, but it's still one of the weirdest hidden facts of Minecraft. It's based on a movie reference, The Shining, which feels a bit dark for a company that wouldn't add sharks into the game because they didn't want to encourage people to hunt them. Mojang loves to surprise though, and speaking of surprise, did you know that you could actually turn Minecraft into a budget Pirates of the Caribbean? Because hidden in Minecraft's language settings is something called the Pirate Speak language. If you switch the game to it, almost all of the text in the entire game changes to sound like a pirate wrote it. For example, achievements suddenly become things like acquire hardware, turning into get your tools together, and boats are sometimes called seafaring vessels. Even simple things like buttons, menus, and item names get rewritten with pirate slang. It can certainly be a fun way to change up your game experience. But believe it or not, Minecraft has an even stranger language hidden inside it. One of the language options in the game is actually called LOLcat. And when you enable it, the entire game suddenly starts speaking in internet cat memes. Items, menus, achievements, everything gets rewritten in that classic broken grammar style. So instead of normal messages, you might see things written like, I can has crafting table, or other meme-style phrases scattered throughout the game. But as strange as the LOLcat language is, there's one option that's somehow even weirder, because Minecraft also includes a language called Upside Down. And when you enable it, every single piece of text in the game flips completely upside down. Menus, items, achievements, everything suddenly looks backwards. The language is actually a reference to one of Minecraft's developers named Dinnerbone, and his influence also extends even further. If you name any mob Dinnerbone with a name tag, the mob will also flip upside down. And Mojang has added even more weird name tag hidden features. Like if you name a sheep Jeb _, its wool will constantly cycle through all the different colors in the game, turning it into a walking rainbow. Unfortunately, the wool you shear from it is still the sheep's original color, but it still looks pretty amazing. And that's not the only strange one either. If you name a rabbit Toast, its texture will actually change to a special black and white skin. This was added by Mojang as a tribute to a player's real-life rabbit named Toast. Speaking of toast, yum. Another interesting fact that you probably have never heard of. Did you know that beetroot is canonically confirmed to be the absolute worst food source in the game? Yeah, even worse than poisonous potatoes, worse than rotten flesh. My proof? Well, I said so, duh. Anyway, did you know that the hoe actually has a lot more uses than just farming? Yeah, you can use it in a lot of other ways as well. In newer versions of the game, hoes are actually the fastest tool for breaking several blocks, including hay bales, leaves, moss, nether wart blocks, and even sponges. So the tool that used to be the most useless item in the game suddenly became one of the most useful. There's also a pretty crazy thing you can do when renaming your tools as well. Typically, when you rename a tool, it comes with italics, but this doesn't always have to be the case. If you type in this code before the name, you can actually remove the italics entirely. By adding a special formatting code before the text, the game treats the name differently and displays it in normal lettering instead of the usual slanted style. Which can just be a cool trick to make your gear unique, but could also be a fun way to prank your friends if you can pull it off. Did you know that if you smelt a wet sponge in a furnace using a lava bucket as fuel, you actually get the bucket back when it's done? The water goes into the bucket instead of just disappearing. Neat little detail that most people never stumble across naturally. Trapdoors cannot be set on fire despite being made of wood. You can place lava right next to one and it just sits there completely unbothered. Which is great for building, but honestly a little suspicious for something that's supposedly just planks nailed together. If a stray ends up underwater, it won't shoot you, which sounds great, until you realize it switches to melee attacks that inflict slowness instead. So you're still having a bad time, just a slower one. Phantoms are the only hostile mob that can spawn in the Mushroom Fields biome. Every other hostile mob is blocked from spawning there entirely, but phantoms ignore that rule. Skip enough sleep and they will find you absolutely anywhere. Spiders are neutral mobs, and what determines their hostility isn't daytime, it's light level. Light level 12 or above and they leave you alone. Drop to 11 or below and suddenly you have a problem. You can saddle and ride a baby strider using commands. It technically works, but it's too small to keep you above the lava, so you take fire damage the whole time. Worth it for the screenshot though. If you summon a minecart as a passenger on top of a bee and then make the bee invisible, you get a flying minecart with no visible explanation. Completely vanilla, completely unhinged. Before wool existed, sheep used to drop something called cloth, which was just wool's original name, along with mushrooms for some reason. Cloth could also be crafted into armor before leather eventually replaced it entirely. Chickens spawned from a baby zombie jockey are coded to never lay eggs. The reason is to stop zombies from picking up the egg item and never despawning. So if you have a mysteriously unproductive chicken in your farm, that might be why. In Java Edition, 89% of skeletons are right-handed and 11% are left-handed, which actually mirrors the real-world ratio of right to left-handed people. A surprisingly specific detail for a mob that's just trying to kill you. Desert temple chests don't actually require you to open them one by one. If you stand in the pit below and trigger the TNT trap, the explosion destroys the chests and drops all the loot directly to you. You survive with barely any damage, and you leave with everything plus a pile of free blocks. Originally, skeletons didn't carry bows at all. In the survival test, they would shoot 6 arrows at once in different directions at short range with no bow in sight. They eventually got their bows in alpha, but held them completely wrong until Java Edition Beta 1.8. The heart texture you see while riding a horse actually depicts a saddle. It's nearly impossible to make out at normal size, but zoomed in you can clearly see the leather and the metal bit of the spur. Not a great texture, but at least now you know what it's supposed to be. The 5-block jump in Minecraft is actually possible, but only under very specific conditions. You need to build up enough momentum and jump at the absolute last pixel of the block. It's completely impractical for survival, but pulling it off once just to say you did it is worth every attempt. The Lily of the Valley has the exact same texture from every single angle you look at it. Walk around it in a full circle, and the flower never changes. It even does it from above. It's a small thing, but once you notice it, you can't stop seeing it. In older versions of Minecraft, chests behaved as full blocks, meaning you could place torches, rails, and even ladders directly on top of them. You can still pull this off today using update suppression, but that's a completely different rabbit hole. If you feed a hoglin crimson fungus, it gains the persistence required tag, meaning it won't despawn no matter how far you walk away. Normally hoglins despawn like any other hostile mob, but that one feeding essentially makes it permanent. You're welcome, sorry about your face. When you rapidly toggle a piston on and off with a gravity block like sand sitting on top, eventually the piston breaks the block and it drops as an item. It's not practical at all, but it's one of those weird mechanical quirks that probably shouldn't work the way it does. In 2017, parrots were added to Minecraft, and when music played from a jukebox nearby, they would cycle through all their color variants based on the classic rainbow dancing parrot meme. You also can't tame them with regular seeds anymore. Torchflower seeds and pitcher pods work instead. Cats in Minecraft take 0 fall damage, but they still actively try to avoid falling anyway, which is very on brand for a cat. Just because they'd survive doesn't mean they want to do it. Baby chickens have such a small hitbox that when one is sitting inside a minecart, it's completely invulnerable. There's no way to hit the chicken without hitting the minecart instead. Bow, sword, anything. The minecart takes it every single time. If you're stuck in a 2-block deep hole with no blocks to pillar out, a door actually solves the problem. Place it down, flip it back and forth, and you can hop up 2 blocks at a time. Any mob stuck in there with you won't be able to follow. The jungle log is actually just a recolored version of the sideways oak log texture. Same details, same pixel layout, just shifted in color. Once you put them side by side, it's pretty hard to unsee, even if the color combination is genuinely horrible. In older versions of Minecraft, if an enderman spawned near the lowest Y levels, the void fog would corrupt its texture. When the game tried to correct it, it overcorrected entirely, leaving the enderman permanently white. A fully albino enderman that you could actually encounter in survival. A falling anvil does massive damage if it lands on you, but if it simply passes by you without landing, you take 0 damage. You can stand right next to a falling anvil in survival and walk away completely fine. It's treated as a falling entity the whole way down, not a projectile. You can use the block display command to build tiny miniature versions of full-size structures in completely vanilla Minecraft. There are even plugins that convert your existing builds into miniatures automatically, which is significantly less painful than inputting every relative coordinate by hand. Horse armor used to have crafting recipes when it was first added in Snapshot 13W16A. They were removed just 24 days later, and horse armor has been loot only ever since. One of the shortest-lived crafting recipes in the game's history. Snow golems were added to Minecraft because Notch got frustrated with Amazon Web Services going down. He was so annoyed by the outage that he coded the snow mob as a distraction. And now you can buy snow golem merchandise on Amazon, which is a full circle moment if there ever was one. Baby piglins will never grow into adults. Ever. They are permanently stuck as babies, coded that way intentionally. So those little gold-stealing nuisances running around your bastion are never going anywhere, and there is nothing you can do about it. Between October 20th and November 3rd every year, bats spawn significantly more frequently as a Halloween reference. It's a cute detail, but bats still don't drop anything and serve no real purpose, so the only thing the extra spawns really accomplish is being more annoying than usual. Armor in Minecraft doesn't actually block damage in the way most players assume. What's really happening is a calculation layer that reduces incoming damage after the game processes it. Enchantments like protection don't just slap on a flat reduction either. They stack into that same calculation. So when you feel tankier in full enchanted armor, that's not just perception, the math is actually doing a lot of work behind the scenes. Fire resistance is another one that seems more absolute than it actually is. Yes, it completely negates fire and lava damage, which is why it's basically mandatory in the Nether. But it doesn't stop knockback from explosions or other forces, so you can still get launched into situations you definitely didn't plan for. It protects you from burning, not from bad decisions. Waterlogged blocks are one of those features that look simple but quietly adds a lot of flexibility. Slabs, stairs, and similar blocks can hold water inside them without replacing the block itself. This allows for builds where water exists inside structures without spilling everywhere. It's the kind of mechanic that doesn't look important at first, but ends up being extremely useful once you start building anything remotely complex. Mob pathfinding is another system that's doing more than it lets on. Mobs don't just wander randomly. They evaluate terrain, obstacles, and possible routes to reach a target. This is why farms and traps rely so heavily on block placement. Move a single block and suddenly mobs behave completely differently. It's less AI and more a very specific set of rules that players have learned how to exploit. Beds in the Nether and End are a perfect example of Mojang turning a simple mechanic into something with consequences. Instead of letting players skip night, using a bed in those dimensions results in an explosion. And while that sounds like punishment, players have absolutely turned it into a tool. It's one of those mechanics that feels like it was added with a warning label that nobody read. Item despawning is another system that seems straightforward but has a small detail that matters a lot. Items disappear after 5 minutes, but only while the chunk is loaded. If the chunk isn't loaded, the timer effectively pauses, so items can sit in unloaded chunks indefinitely until a player comes back. This is especially relevant in automated systems, where items travel across distances without the player being nearby. Fishing has more structure than it first appears. The loot isn't random in a completely flat sense. It's divided into categories like junk, treasure, and fish, each with weighted probabilities. Enchantments like Luck of the Sea shift those probabilities toward better outcomes. So while fishing still feels a bit random, there's actually a predictable system underneath it if you care enough to optimize it. Endermen interacting with water is less about behavior and more about damage triggers. When exposed to water or rain, they take damage, which causes them to teleport away. So it's not that they hate water in a psychological sense, they're just reacting to something that hurts them. Still, the end result is the same. Water is one of the simplest ways to deal with them, which is why players rely on it more than they probably should. Villager gossip is one of those systems that quietly affects gameplay without being obvious. Villagers share reputation information about players, which influences trade prices and interactions. Positive actions improve reputation, while negative actions spread just as quickly in the opposite direction. This is why trading halls become more efficient over time. The system essentially rewards consistent interaction with better deals across the board. Mob spawning and light levels are another area where small details matter a lot. Hostile mobs generally require low light levels, but the exact conditions can vary depending on the mob and environment. Because of that, mob farms are built with very controlled lighting to ensure spawns only happen where intended. Even a single misplaced light source can reduce efficiency, which is why experienced players treat lighting like part of the core design rather than an afterthought. Another system that players interact with all the time without thinking about it is chunk loading. The world in Minecraft isn't actually loaded all at once. It's divided into chunks that load and unload based on player proximity. This is why farms stop working when you move far enough away. It's not that the farm breaks, it just literally stops existing in the game's active memory for a moment. Chunk loading also explains why some farms are designed very specifically around chunk boundaries. Advanced builds often account for where chunks begin and end to ensure that all necessary parts stay active at the same time. If you get that wrong, you can end up with a setup that looks perfect, but quietly does nothing. Another mechanic that doesn't get enough attention is entity cramming. When too many entities occupy the same space, the game starts dealing damage to prevent infinite stacking. This is commonly used in mob farms to convert large groups of mobs into drops efficiently. At the same time, it also acts as a soft limit to prevent performance issues, which is probably one of the few times the game is actively trying to protect itself from the player. Minecarts are another system that behaves differently depending on how you use them. Powered rails, slopes, and momentum all affect how minecarts move, and their physics aren't exactly intuitive at first. With enough setup, minecarts can be used for item transport, player transport, and even mob movement systems. They're one of those features that seem simple but become extremely powerful once you start combining them with redstone. Speaking of redstone, observers are a key component that often confuses newer players. An observer detects block updates and emits a signal when something changes in front of it. This allows players to build systems that react automatically to crop growth, piston movement, or other environmental changes. It's essentially the game's way of letting players watch the world without constantly checking it manually. Observers are especially useful in automated farms, where they can trigger harvest mechanisms at the exact moment something changes. This removes the need for manual timing and makes fully automatic systems possible. Once you understand observers, a lot of redstone suddenly becomes much more practical instead of just theoretical. Another subtle mechanic involves hitboxes. Every mob and player has a defined hitbox that determines how collisions and attacks are calculated. These hitboxes are not always visually obvious, and in some cases, they can be slightly larger or smaller than expected. This affects combat, movement, and even building precision, especially when working in tight spaces. Projectile behavior is also worth noting. Arrows, tridents, and other projectiles follow trajectories influenced by gravity and velocity. However, they also interact with hitboxes in specific ways that can lead to edge cases in combat. This is why accuracy matters more than raw damage in many situations, since missing shots is usually more punishing than low damage output. And that's most of what's going on behind the scenes in Minecraft, systems interacting in ways that are way more complex than they look at first glance. If you found this useful, consider subscribing and becoming a member for more breakdowns like this.